So it's Tiny Little Histories Day, November 20th, 2021. We're absolutely delighted with our pilot program for Tiny Little Histories. And we've been interviewing some of the artists who are involved in Tiny Little Histories. And I'm delighted to have Helena Enright here today to talk to us about her project, which features Our Lady and Bedford Row, which is very, very interesting. So Helena, tell us, well, welcome, certainly welcome, Helena, and welcome back to
Yes,
Limerick.
thanks, Maeve. Thank you very much. Glad to be
Great to
here.
have you back in the arts world in Limerick. We're delighted to have you here. So Our Lady in Bedford Row.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about this, about your tiny, teensy little history.
Yeah. So as you know, I've been working with stories like for a long time. Was working in England and here in Ireland, and both kind of doing a lot with kind of people's oral histories, people's tiny little stories in ways, and some of the tiny details that you hear in the fragments of little stories that really kind of open up a wider kind of lens onto a social history of the time or different things that were happening. So when the call went out for this project and we were kind of talking about it, I was like, oh, I wonder what kind of tiny little histories there could be about. And I'd just come back to Ireland, so I was like, and so I was chatting to my dad, and had he any stories of growing up and stuff like that, because the last piece I did in Limerick was the river. So, which, I spent a lot of time down by Bedford Row and all that area, kind of looking at the river and gathering stories. I was asking Dad about any stories from him growing up in Limerick and different things. And so Dad said, he was like, he'd often talk about the Bedford garage, and he'd worked there as a young person in the store as a messenger boy, kind of, and he'd met a lot of mechanics there and stuff. So and there something had been on Facebook a few months ago about the Bedford. There was a picture, and there was all these people kind of going, I worked there, I worked there, I worked there, I worked there. And I was like, gosh, was it that big? Anyway, we started chatting, and I said, surely you must have some little story. And he started to tell me about Our Lady and this big statue that was over the storeroom, and how they prayed the Rosary there every Tuesday morning, which in the research for this, I found out that a lot of the factories pray the Rosary. So it was really interesting,
isn't it? Really,
it's a confraternity, and also you had the Marian year in 1954, so it was on the back of that. I mean, I'm from Woodlawn Park in the city, so there's a shrine outside, and women pray the Rosary still there every evening, weekdays, I think. I'm not sure about weekends.
It's such a big part of Limerick. You hear about it.
There's shrines everywhere.
And the confraternity, and you'd go to mass, and I find it just a fascinating part of the Limerick history in particular.
Yes, it is. And both my parents met at the confraternity.
Love it.
So that's
And we're Salesian girls, so it takes me back to the days of Joy Club and Sister Joan and Sister Anne over in Cardiff, and we used to we had these lovely prayer meetings. So like prayer was a very big important part of our community.
It was time, and a devotion to Our Lady. I mean, like Salesians had was Our Lady help Christians, and I remember the month of May, especially I was talking to a friend about this story, because there's a dad going up with the flowers in front of Our Lady is part of the story, which is where it all goes wrong. But and a friend of mine went, oh gosh, do you remember the May altars? The May altar was a really big thing. And in the month of May, I went to Fernbank and Salesians, and when you got to 5th class and 6th class, you made up songs in honor of Our Lady, and there was a concert. So what you would do is take you'd get the pop songs of the day and change the words, and there was
past TikTok.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it was like, there was an aha, take on me, and it was pray for me, pray for me. There was another one, words don't come easy. Do you remember that song? Words don't come easy to us. So it was like, prayers don't come easy to us.
Brilliant.
And it was the honor to get into 5th and 6th class to present those, and there'd be a big concert.
Yeah. And the May parade, there was that, if you made your communion that year, your confirmation, you dressed up in your rig out, and off you went,
Off you went. And then the Corpus Christi ones in June, which that was a big thing. Yeah.
And I think that, a couple of years ago, Duncan Malloy did Mass, which I thought was a really interesting. He kind of did an interpretation of where where we are within our communities, how important I suppose mass was to
Yes.
us, you know, and still
Yeah.
is for many people now. But for us, it was it gave us that community. You
Yeah.
know, you went to mass, sometimes there was a cup of tea afterwards, you know,
Yeah.
and it kind of did build that community. So I was fascinated when this came in, and I think this is part of who you are, and
Yeah.
you know, theater of testimony is very, very important to you, Helena. It's what you work through. Just
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that, if you can, you know, for people
Yeah.
who don't know what that is, you know,
Yeah.
what it is.
So basically, it's interviewing people about something that happened in their lives, or an event, or something they may have witnessed, or something they've been through. And then I would, I mean, I came across the forum when I was doing a master's down in UCC back in the early 2000s. And I was really struck by how people experience life. I've always been interested in like people's lives, kind of. And I was working with some kids the other night, and I said, I like to call it curious rather than nosy, but
Yes,
I'm probably
yes.
a bit nosy. Well, I'm just fascinated, you know, how we live. But I remember reading a play, studying a play called The Permanent Way, which was about the rail, so a number of rail crashes that had happened in the 90s in the UK. And it was about, you know, like a comment really on the privatization of the rail service over there. And they'd interviewed lots of different people, because it falls under a branch of kind of documentary theatre. And so they'd interviewed lots of people about, you know, from like managers in the rail service, politicians, workers in the rail service. But they'd also interviewed people who had survived the rail crashes, and also family members who had lost people. People had died in the crashes. And it was their testimonies that really struck me, because I thought, there's all these, you know, you'd guys in the play talking about floating the rail network on the stock exchange and the treasury, and all these big decisions made at the top. And I thought, and then somebody steps on a train that day and their life has changed forever, or their family's lives have changed. So that was something that really struck a chord with me. And so I became more interested in that sort of form of theatre and what that might offer to society. So that's kind of led me into it. So it's basically, I interview somebody or a group of people or a number of people, whatever, and then I use their words. And it's normally actors speak those words, because often the people, you know, wouldn't want to go on stage, or different things, and it can be quite traumatic depending on what, you know, all sorts of different reasons. So the actors speak the words, and it's not about mimicking the people, because they often don't even listen to the oral testimony, they work from the page, because there's something, I think, in the spirit of storytelling and in the words we use. And a lot of people who make this work talk about that there's a psychology already contained in the words and the way we phrase them and the way we speak them. So I try to capture that on the page, and then the actor tries to capture it. They might listen a little bit just to get a sense of the person, but it's not, definitely not about copying. It's about the idea of passing stories on.
And how, you know, your dad in this, you know, because I
Yes.
know your dad is, and it's so great listening to him as well, you know, because I find that a lot of people who are telling these just super stories are like, oh, well, you don't want to hear this, really, you know, sure, this is just a thing. Okay, let me tell you now. So we were going to, you know, and it's really lovely. It's really, and you've presumably interviewed your dad before, though, have you, for something?
No. I mean, I've listened to him tell stories lots of time, but I've never. And actually, it's funny, when I wrote my first testimony play called Less Than a Year, it was on the subject of cancer. And my dad had cancer when he was 45, and that was a real defining moment in our lives. And, you know, thankfully, obviously, he's alive today, and fine. But I was only 19, and I could have interviewed him about his experience when I was doing the play. It would have been about kind of 10 years later. But I decided, I was kind of probably a bit afraid to interview my own family for the stage. So I haven't really interviewed him. But I noticed when I was doing The River, lots and talking about it, and people have gone to see the play and different things, stories, you know, once people hear stories being told, they start to tell more stories, and it opens up that kind of thing. So yeah, dad, you know, would tell us lots of stories. So but listening to it the other night, kind of when I was working on it, I recorded him a couple of times, and then various kind of edits of it and stuff. And I was like, oh, I need to do more of this. I need to record the family talking, even for the grandkids coming up and all future generations. It's wonderful.
And that's really, I suppose, what Tiny Little Histories is that we're trying to capture those untold stories, and you know, stories that just pass away with people
Yeah.
if we don't capture them, if we don't collect them, even in a very raw format, you know, that we're just saying, look, you know, speak into this. And you know, we were very, very lucky that Kate Fellows, they had done very similar, it was a different name over in Leeds. She spoke to us about this at Creative Communities Midwest. And they have a brilliant website now, learning.org, where they've got all the stories up there. And there were stories about an elephant, the day an elephant went through Leeds. And, you know, after speaking with Kate, we were like, would be a really great project for the Midwest. You know, there are so many, we all know King John's Castle, we all know, you know, all the stories about that are around there, but the stories that, you know, people don't know about. And you are working on a really interesting project at the moment, Helena, which I know we hope to take into next year, called Audio Charged, where it's an intergenerational project, meeting with young people and, you know, retired citizens of Limerick who have worked in factories in Limerick and industrial environments in Limerick. And I think that that's a really important project, from somebody from Ferenca to the mattress factory to Halpin's Tea to Krups, you know, to capture those. People had great stories to tell, didn't they?
Oh, amazing stories. But I was working with the young kids on Thursday evening, and we were talking about, I was like, you know, nobody went to university really back then. Those factories were their universities. That's where they, you know, met their lifelong friends. I have a gang of cousins. I said gang of cousins who worked in crops, and there was a gang of people associated with that. And you had like the tops of the towns, all the big companies, you know, did tops of the towns. They did community shamses, and my dad was involved in community shamses when I was younger, which was probably, you know, they say, you know, lots of things happen when you're around that 2-3 age, kind of that form your kind of direction in life. I was taken, you know, around the like St. Patrick's and St. Bridget's community halls backstage at Shames's. So it's no wonder I ended up in theatre.
And Up With People came to Limerick, remember?
It did,
and, you know,
exactly.
Great,
you know?
great things, and I think that it's really important. I know it's a very small project this year, and
but the people are just
expand.
Like, loads of people have been since you know, call went out on Facebook there a week or two ago for stories, and the amount of people getting in contact saying, oh, my mother worked there, or my father worked there, or you know, grandmother worked there, or this and that. And I remember stories and all these, you know, factories. So I've sent the young kids away to do some research now about the factories for the week. So we'll see what they come back with next week. I was saying that there was bacon factories as well.
The
and we were talking
factory, about, I know it's trying to avoid that one.
The one up the Thomas Street one. Like, I remember,
I think we all do.
One of the young guys said, you know, what if I bring in a really gruesome picture of a pig being slaughtered? I was like,
please don't.
Please don't. Well, you know, they were just fascinated by the different factories.
And that was part of the city, you know. And
it was, I remember hearing the squeal of the pig.
You know, it's so hard, isn't it? But I'm really interested in this, and I think that and it all ties back into, you know, our tiny little histories and those memories, and they're just so important. And look, thank you so much, Helena. We're thrilled to have you as part of this project as well.
Yeah, and thrilled to be back.
Thrilled to have you, and anybody who's around and who is you know what, we'll have them live tonight. We're live streaming on our YouTube and our Facebook, and then they'll be up on Twitter, Instagram and SoundCloud as well. The best link to go to is thegafflimerick.com/Tiny Little Histories, because you'll find all the information there, and you'll be able to play them back after they go live tonight as well. So Gurmila, Helena, and thank you so much for sharing your story and your dad's story. Thanks a million.